can't," he said. "You don't understand. They have my sister. They said if I don't bring you back." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Amara's stomach twisted. It wasn't cruelty that drove him. It was desperation, family, the same thing she was fighting for. "You don't have to do this," she said, voice breaking. Giorgio's eyes shone with grief. "I do." Slowly he pulled the rifle from his back, not aiming it, not yet, but holding it between them like a wall that couldn't be crossed. "I'll say I found you unconscious," he said. "I'll tell them you were too weak to resist. They might be lenient if you surrender now." Ezra coughed behind her, a harsh, rattling sound. Amara's fists clenched at her sides. She had two choices: give up, or fight a boy she once loved like a brother. "I'm sorry," Giorgio whispered, and Amara knew he meant it, knew it tore him up inside. But that didn't change what had to happen. She moved fast, faster than Giorgio expected. In 2 steps, she was on him, grabbing the barrel of the rifle and wrenching it downward. Giorgio stumbled, shouting, but Amara didn't stop. She kneed him in the stomach, then shoved him backward into the dirt. "Run!" she screamed at Ezra, but Ezra couldn't. He was too weak. Amara didn't think. She grabbed a burning branch from the fire and swung it wildly. Giorgio flinched back, hands up, eyes wide. "I'm sorry," Amara gasped through her tears, "but I can't let you take us back." She threw the branch down at his feet, flames licking at his boots, and hauled Ezra onto her shoulder. Somehow she found the strength. They stumbled into the woods, half running, half falling. Behind them, Giorgio shouted her name, not in anger, in heartbreak. They didn't look back. They couldn't. Amara's lungs burned. Ezra's weight dragged her down with every step, but adrenaline was a drug, and love was a war cry. She would carry him through hell itself if she had to, because freedom wasn't just something you were given, it was something you stole, piece by bloody piece. Hours later, when the sun began to bleed into the sky, they collapsed under an olive tree. Safe for now. Amara lay beside Ezra, gasping, blinking up at the bruised pink sky. Tears slid down her temples into her hair. Not from pain, not from fear, but from the unbearable grief of knowing she'd hurt someone who once would have died for her. That was the cost of love. That was the cost of survival, and there would be more debts to pay before this was over. A world beyond the hills. Morning light painted the hills in gold and ash, but to Amara it looked like a battlefield. Each step she took felt heavier than the last, each breath thinner and sharper in her lungs. Ezra leaned heavily on her shoulder, his face pale and clammy. He hadn't spoken a word since the woods, and still they moved forward. The hills that bordered their town were steep, craggy things, littered with jagged rocks and gnarled trees. A no-man's land whispered about in the village for its dangers, snakes, bandits, patrols. But beyond them, a new world, a place where no one knew their names, a place where their love could be more than a death sentence. Amara clung to that dream like a prayer. The wind was harsh here. It howled like a living thing, whipping Amara's hair into her face, chilling the sweat on her back. She scanned the horizon desperately. There, down in the valley, a dirt road, tiny from here, almost invisible. But it was there, and where roads led, there were villages, and where there were villages, there were chances. "We're close," she whispered to Ezra, squeezing his hand. He stirred faintly, eyes fluttering open. "For once." "I believe you," he rasped, smiling weakly. It almost broke her, but she forced the sob back down her throat and kept moving. Halfway down the hill, disaster struck. A shout echoed up from the trees below. Men, uniformed, armed, border patrol. Amara cursed under her breath, yanking Ezra down behind a boulder. From their hiding place, she counted 5 of them. 5 soldiers, 5 rifles, 5 chances to die. She closed her eyes, heart hammering against her ribs. They couldn't outrun them. They couldn't outfight them. All they could do was wait. Hope the soldiers moved on. Minutes dragged by, thick and suffocating. Ezra was slipping again, his head lolling against her shoulder, his breath shallow and rapid. She needed to find help. Now if she waited too long, she'd lose him anyway. Slowly, Amara peeked over the boulder. The soldiers were laughing, tossing a cigarette back and forth, joking in rapid, careless voices. Young, cocky, maybe careless enough, maybe. She made her choice. Setting Ezra down gently, she whispered, "Stay." Then she grabbed a rock, small enough to throw, heavy enough to make noise, and hurled it far across the hillside. It clattered noisily against the stones. The soldiers stiffened, guns raised. One barked something, too far for Amara to hear, and 2 of them broke off, moving toward the sound. Perfect. Heart hammering, she slipped from her hiding spot, dragging Ezra with her. Down the hill, fast, clumsy, desperate, praying to any god who might be listening. They made it to the dirt road. Amara staggered forward, Ezra's weight nearly pulling her to the ground. A cart was coming, an old wooden cart pulled by a donkey, driven by a woman with a scarf wrapped tight around her face. For a second, Amara thought she might collapse from relief. The woman pulled the cart to a stop, eyeing them suspiciously. Amara stumbled to her knees. "Please," she gasped in broken dialect. "Help us, please." The woman looked them over, dirty, bleeding, half dead. She glanced back toward the hills, where gunshots suddenly cracked through the air. Decision made. The woman reached down, yanked Amara to her feet, and helped her load Ezra onto the cart. Without a word, she cracked the reins. The donkey lurched forward, and just like that, they were moving, away from the hills, away from the past, toward something terrifying and new. Amara clutched Ezra's hand, pressing her forehead against the rough wooden side of the cart. She didn't dare cry. Not yet. There would be time for tears later. If they survived, if they found a place to build the life they dreamed of. In the distance, the mountains rose high and blue against the sky. Amara stared at them through burning eyes, and for the first time in weeks she dared, barely, to believe. Maybe love was not so easily killed after all, when walls are not enough. The village of San Lucas sat low between the mountains like a secret the world had forgotten. It was little more than a handful of crumbling stone houses, a crooked chapel, and a well so dry it echoed when you dropped a stone inside. Dust clung to everything, the streets, the windows, the souls of the people who lived there. Amara and Ezra didn't belong. It was obvious from the moment the cart rolled into town. The woman who had rescued them, Senora Camila, spoke quickly to a gathering of villagers, her hands moving in sharp, urgent gestures. Most frowned. Some crossed themselves. A few simply turned and walked away. Inside a small, abandoned stable, Amara laid Ezra down on a pile of musty hay. He hadn't woken up since the hills. His skin burned with fever. His body was a trembling wreck. She pressed a damp cloth to his forehead, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "You'll be okay," she murmured. "You'll see. We'll make it." But the truth, it curdled like sour milk in her chest. Ezra needed real help, a doctor, medicine, things she had no way to get. That night, Amara sat in the corner of the stable, knees pulled tight to her chest. Every muscle in her body ached, every breath felt like glass. Outside, voices drifted on the cold night air, suspicious, angry. They'll bring trouble? Outlaws, not our fight. She buried her face in her hands. They weren't wrong. Trouble was stitched into her skin now, woven into her blood. The next morning, Senora Camila brought bread and water. She didn't stay, didn't speak, just left the supplies by the door and hurried away. Even kindness here came wrapped in fear. Days passed in a haze. Ezra drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling out for his mother, sometimes whispering Amara's name like a prayer. Amara foraged for herbs, begged for scraps, did anything she could to keep him alive. But it wasn't enough. The infection was winning, and San Lucas was losing patience. One evening, as the sun bled into the mountains, 3 men came to the stable. Their faces were hard, their hands calloused. Amara stood protectively in front of Ezra, trembling but refusing to move. The tallest man, with a jagged scar down his cheek, spoke. "You can't stay," he said flatly. "You bring death to our door." Amara shook her head desperately. "Please, just a few more days. He's sick. We don't have enough for our own." The man cut her off. "How can we give to strangers?" The other 2 nodded grimly. "We fought to survive here," another added. "Fought to keep what little we have." Amara looked into their eyes and saw not cruelty, but fear. Fear of losing the scraps they had bled for, fear of outsiders, fear of war catching them in its teeth once more. And maybe she couldn't blame them. Still, she begged, on her knees, with every shred of pride and dignity stripped away. "Please," she whispered, tears choking her throat. "He's all I have." The men exchanged glances. Finally, the scarred one spoke. 3 days, he said gruffly. "Then you go, one way or another." Then they left, slamming the stable door behind them. Amara curled up beside Ezra that night, her body racked with silent sobs. How much more could they lose? How many more walls would close around them? Yet even in that pit of despair, a spark stubbornly burned inside her. They hadn't survived so much, the raids, the betrayal, the escape, to die here, nameless and forgotten. Amara tightened her grip on Ezra's limp hand. 3 days. She would find a way, or die trying. The price of mercy. The nights in San Lucas grew colder. Wind slipped through the stable's broken slats, carrying whispers of frost and death. Ezra's fever worsened. His breaths became shallow. His skin turned the pale grey of crumbling stone. Amara sat beside him, clutching his hand, her own fingers numb from fear more than cold. 3 days, 2 already gone. Time bleeding away faster than she could stop it. Senora Camila came again, but this time she didn't leave the bread at the door. She stepped inside, her face tight with guilt. "I know someone," she said quietly. "A man in the hills, a healer. Not a doctor, but he knows things." Amara sprang to her feet, desperation igniting inside her. "Take me," she pleaded. "Please." Camilla hesitated. Her eyes darted to the doorway, to the growing shadows outside. "If they find out," she whispered, voice cracking, "they will turn on me, on you, maybe even kill us both." Amara didn't blink. "I don't care," she said, her voice hoarse. "I'll pay any price." That night, under a sliver of broken moon, Amara followed Camilla out of the village. Every step through the fields was a prayer, every breath a gamble. They reached a crooked path, half eaten by thorns, leading up the mountain. At the end of it stood a shack barely upright, its windows black and unwelcoming. Camilla knocked twice, then once more. An old man answered, skin like bark, eyes sharp and suspicious. Without a word, Camilla slipped away, vanishing into the darkness, leaving Amara alone. Inside, the shack smelled of herbs and blood. Bundles of dried plants hung from the ceiling. Bones, animal or human, she couldn't tell, dangled like wind chimes. The man, Don Mateo, spoke in a voice that sounded like breaking leaves. "You're desperate," he said simply. "You wouldn't be here otherwise." Amara nodded, her throat too tight to speak. He stared at her for a long moment. Finally, he said, "Everything has a price." He prepared a mixture, something bitter, something sharp, wrapped in dirty cloth. "This might save him," Don Mateo said, "or it might kill him faster." Amara didn't hesitate. She reached into her pocket, pulling out everything she had, a crumpled photograph of her family, her father's broken watch, Ezra's silver ring. "Take it," she said, her voice a raw whisper. "Take everything." Don Mateo's mouth twisted, not into a smile, but something colder. "You don't understand," he said, and then he pointed to the door. "The price is not in gold," he said, "it's in loyalty." When Amara looked at him, confused and frightened, he explained, he wanted her to deliver a message to the soldiers camped beyond the valley, a message that would betray San Lucas, their hiding places, their numbers, their defences, the villagers who had given her shelter, even if unwillingly. In exchange, Ezra might live. If she refused, Don Mateo would tell them about her visit, tell them she brought sickness, betrayal. They would kill her, and Ezra would die anyway. Amara stumbled out of the shack, the packet of medicine clutched to her chest, the weight of the choice clawing at her lungs. Betray the village that hated her, or watch Ezra die. Her heart fractured with every step back. In the stable, she knelt by Ezra's side, tears streaming silently down her face. "I don't know what to do," she whispered against his burning skin. "I don't know any more." Ezra stirred. His eyes fluttered open for a second, dazed, feverish, but enough to whisper through cracked lips, "Do the right thing, Amara, even if it hurts." That night, Amara made her choice. She would not betray San Lucas, even if they had turned away from her, even if they saw her as a ghost, a curse. She would not be the monster war tried to make her. If Ezra died, if she died, at least it would not be as traitors. With shaking hands, she gave Ezra the medicine, prayed over every drop, begged whatever gods were still listening, and waited, in the darkness, in the silence, between hope and despair, between life and death. The hours after Amara gave Ezra the medicine were the longest of her life. She sat by him through the night, through the icy dawn, through the grey, sickly light of daybreak, listening, counting every breath. Sometimes his chest barely moved. Sometimes he whimpered like a wounded animal. Every time he coughed, she flinched, terrified it would be the last sound he ever made. By the second evening, a change came. Ezra's fever broke. He soaked the blankets in sweat, his skin flushed and burning, but his breathing eased. A thread of life tightened inside him. Amara cried, silent tears of exhaustion, relief, and terror, because recovery didn't guarantee safety. Not here, not anymore. Rumours stirred in San Lucas. The butcher's wife whispered that sickness had entered the village. The innkeeper swore he saw that girl skulking through the fields at night. Old men at the cantina muttered about curses and spies. Fear twisted their grief into hatred, and hatred always needed a face. Senora Camila came to the stable again. Her hands shook as she gave Amara a torn loaf of bread. "You have to leave," she whispered, "before they come for you." Amara clutched the bread to her chest, numb. "I can't," she said simply. "Ezra," Camilla's eyes softened, but fear sharpened her voice. "They will hang you," she said, "and they will burn him too." Her words fell like stones, heavy, inevitable. Ezra awoke properly that night, his eyes opened, clear and aware for the first time in days. "Amara," he rasped, reaching weakly for her. She caught his hand, pressing it against her cheek. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm here." Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to laugh, to scream, to collapse. Instead, she just squeezed his fingers tighter. Ezra tried to sit up, failed. Pain twisted his face into a grimace. "What happened?" he asked, voice rough like gravel. Amara hesitated. How could she tell him? About Don Mateo's offer, about the price she refused to pay. Instead, she smiled through her tears. "You lived," she said. "That's all that matters." But outside, the village closed in. The blacksmith's boy spotted them through a crack in the stable wall. By morning, angry voices would rise. Torches would be lit. Amara knew it in her bones. Time was running out. Again. They had saved love from death once. Now they would have to save it from hatred, from fear, from the heavy, bleeding hands of a world that would rather kill what it didn't understand than heal it, ashes or escape. The villagers came at dawn. It began with the church bells, not in celebration, not in mourning, but a jagged, frantic clanging, a cry for blood. Amara jolted awake to the sound, her heart already slamming against her ribs. Ezra stirred weakly beside her, his body still frail, barely healing. She crawled to the crack in the stable wall. Outside, the world had turned into something unrecognizable. They were coming, all of them. Men with axes, pitchforks, rusted knives, mothers gripping stones with shaking hands, children dragged along, eyes wide and afraid. In the centre of the mob, Father Luis, white robes snapping in the cold wind, a crucifix clutched like a weapon. "They're here," Amara whispered. Ezra tried to sit up and failed, coughing hard. Blood stained his lips. Amara grabbed the pack she had secretly prepared in the night, a stolen canteen, a heel of bread, Ezra's coat. There would be no more chances. The first torch struck the barn wall. Dry straw hissed into flame. Smoke clawed its way inside, thick and blinding. Amara yanked Ezra up, slinging his arm over her shoulders. His body sagged against hers, dead weight. "I can't," he gasped. "You have to," she hissed, her own lungs filling with smoke. Because if he stayed, they would burn him alive. If he stayed, everything they had fought for would end in ash. The back wall, it was their only chance. Through the smoke, Amara saw the boards, old, rotted, weak. She lowered her shoulder and slammed into them, once, twice, 3 times. The wood cracked, then split open with a shriek. Cold air rushed in, and with it, the sound of shouting, the fury of a mob. No time. She dragged Ezra through the gap, stumbling into the frozen dirt behind the barn. "There!" someone screamed. A stone whistled past Amara's head. They ran, or rather, Amara ran, half carrying, half dragging Ezra across the open fields. The smoke thickened behind them, blackening the sky. A village burning its own soul. Ezra coughed violently, every step agony. "I'm slowing you down," he croaked. She tightened her grip on him. "Shut up!" she said, her voice cracking. "I don't leave you. Not now, not ever." They reached the river just as the sun cracked the horizon. The water was bone cold, black with winter. On the other side, the forest. Freedom, maybe. Death, almost certainly. Behind them, the roar of the mob closing in. Ahead, a drowning risk. Ezra looked at the water and shook his head weakly. "I can't swim like this," he said. Amara gritted her teeth so hard she tasted blood. "I'll swim for both of us," she said. He stared at her, helpless, devastated. "I'll kill you," he said. "You'll die because of me." She touched his face. "Better to die trying than burn behind," she whispered. And with that she waded in. The river bit like knives. She gasped, almost losing her grip. Ezra clung to her weakly as she kicked, fought, pulled him across the churning current. Every stroke tore at her muscles. Every second stretched into forever. On the shore, the villagers watched, shouting curses, their voices blurred by wind and water. Halfway across, Ezra slipped from her grasp. "No!" she screamed, plunging beneath the freezing surface. Her fingers caught his wrist, hauled him back up. He was unconscious, blue-lipped, dead-weighted. But she kept going, because love, real love, was madness. It was breathless. It was drowning for someone who couldn't even save themselves. It was everything or nothing. When her feet finally struck mud, she collapsed, dragging Ezra's limp body onto the riverbank. She pressed her ear to his chest. For a second, one long, endless second, there was nothing. Then a thready, broken heartbeat. Alive. Behind them, the village burned. San Lucas was devouring itself, all its hatred made visible in fire and smoke. Amara stared at it for a long moment, trembling. Then she leaned down, kissed Ezra's forehead, and whispered, "We don't belong there anymore." She pulled him up once more, and together, broken but breathing, they stumbled into the trees, into the unknown, into the future, in the wild. The forest swallowed them whole. It was a world without paths, without promises, just endless trees hunching under the weight of winter. The river was a distant roar behind them. San Lucas was nothing more than a memory now, smothered in smoke. The only thing that felt real was the bitter cold gnawing at Amara's hands and Ezra's shallow, broken breaths. They walked. If you could call it walking, more like stumbling. Ezra leaned heavily against Amara, each step a gamble between moving forward and crumpling into the frozen dirt. The first night, they found a hollow beneath a fallen oak. Amara managed to build a small fire, tiny, shivering flames, using twigs and her last sliver of dry cloth. Ezra curled into himself, shaking uncontrollably. Amara sat close, wrapping her body around him, willing her own heat into his skin. She could feel how thin he had become, how fragile, how easy it would be for death to simply take him. Her eyes stung, not just from the smoke, but from something deeper, something breaking. In the flickering light, she watched him. Ezra's face was bruised, his lips cracked and blue, but it was his expression that cut her the deepest, distant, hollow, defeated. The boy who had once dared to dream of far-off cities, grand love stories, escape, now he looked like a ghost. And suddenly fear gripped her, not fear of the villagers, not fear of death, fear of losing him even if they survived. He stirred, his voice barely a whisper. "You should leave me," he said. Amara tightened her arms around him. "Stop," she said, her voice firm. "You can still live," Ezra rasped. "I don't want to live without you," she said simply. He looked at her, then really looked, and she saw tears building in his eyes. I'm not worth it, he said. You're worth everything, she answered, pressing her forehead to his. For a long time, they just breathed together, two broken creatures daring to believe they still mattered. Days blurred together after that. The cold became a living thing, stalking them, stripping away their strength. Food was scarce, shelter even scarcer. Sometimes Amara thought she heard wolves in the distance, howling. Other times, it was just the wind, mocking them. They fought. It was inevitable. Small, sharp arguments born from exhaustion and fear. You don't listen, Ezra snapped one night, after Amara insisted they keep moving despite his fever. And you don't fight hard enough, she shot back, anger masking the terror in her chest. Silence fell heavy between them, thicker than the snow. But always, they circled back to each other, apologies mumbled into the freezing dark. Because love, real love, wasn't just the passion, it was the staying, even when everything screamed run. One morning, Ezra woke her with a broken whisper. Look. She blinked, dazed with cold and hunger. Ahead of them, through the skeletal trees, was a dirt road, and beyond that, rising like a mirage, smoke. But not the angry black smoke of burning villages, soft smoke, home smoke, a settlement, maybe salvation, maybe another danger. Amara looked at Ezra. His eyes held the same fear hers did. Trust no one, hope cautiously. But beneath it, something else stirred. A spark, a maybe, a tomorrow. She took his hand. Let's find out, she said. And together they stepped out of the woods, into whatever came next, strangers and crossroads. The settlement wasn't much. A handful of houses huddled together like old women gossiping against the cold, their roofs sagging under the weight of winter. Children in patched clothing played listlessly near a frozen well. Dogs barked as Amara and Ezra emerged from the tree line, two battered souls looking more like ghosts than travellers. For a moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Every head turned, every eye narrowed. Suspicion, fear, and something else Amara couldn't name. A hunger, maybe, or loneliness just as deep as theirs. An older woman approached first. Her shawl was thick but threadbare, her eyes sharp under the wrinkled folds of her face. She leaned heavily on a carved cane, but her voice, when she spoke, was strong. "Where do you come from?" Ezra tried to answer, but his voice cracked into nothing. Amara stepped forward, her throat dry. "Nowhere, everywhere," she said carefully. It wasn't a lie. The woman's eyes flickered, reading them, reading the bruises, the frostbitten fingers, the way Ezra swayed on his feet. Finally, she nodded. "Name's Elodia," she said. "You look half dead. Come." And just like that, the spell broke. Life moved again. Inside Elodia's cottage, the warmth hit them like a slap. The fire roared. The smell of soup made Amara dizzy with hunger. She guided Ezra to a low bench, where he collapsed gratefully. Elodia bustled around them, clucking under her breath, muttering about foolish children and reckless roads. Amara sat stiffly, wary. Kindness, she had learned, was sometimes just another kind of trap. Others trickled in. Curious faces, rough hands, guarded smiles. There was Matteo, a young man with a permanent scowl, missing 2 fingers on his left hand. There was Lisa, a woman with a baby slung over her hip, watching Amara with open distrust. And old Garin, silent, heavy-browed, his knife never far from his belt. Every look said the same thing: earn your place, or leave. Elodia served them soup, thick with root vegetables, and some unidentifiable meat. Amara forced herself to eat slowly, even though every fibre of her wanted to devour it. Ezra could barely hold the spoon, his hands trembling. Elodia noticed. "Got a healer here?" she said gruffly. "Marin, he'll see to him." Amara nodded, swallowing down her pride. They needed these people, at least for now. That night, they were given a small loft above Elodia's kitchen. The mattress was stuffed with straw. The window was cracked. The roof creaked with every gust of wind, but it was heaven compared to the frozen forest. Amara sat awake long after Ezra fell into fevered sleep. She listened to the creaks and murmurs of the house, the soft crying of a child, the muttered prayers of tired men, and she thought, maybe we could stay. Maybe. But trust, once broken, heals slow, and old fears whispered in her ear. What if these people turned on them? What if the soldiers came looking? What if Ezra's fever never broke? Her heart twisted painfully. She reached out and brushed a curl from Ezra's forehead. "Stay with me," she whispered into the darkness, as if sheer will alone could keep him breathing. "Downstairs," Elodia whispered with Garin. Words Amara couldn't hear. Warnings, worries, and far off in the night, the distant echo of boots on a road, coming closer, always closer, fever and fear. The fever came for Ezra in the dead of night. One moment he was tossing in restless dreams, the next his body shook so violently the straw mattress rustled with every movement. Amara woke to the sound of his teeth chattering, his breath ragged and thin. "No, no, no," she whispered, scrambling to his side. His skin was burning, his pulse fluttered under her fingers like a trapped bird. "Ezra," she said, shaking him gently. "Ezra, wake up." He didn't. Panic clawed at her throat. She stumbled down the ladder into the dark kitchen, barefoot and shivering. The fire had burned low. Shadows clung to every corner. She grabbed Elodia's shawl from a hook and raced into the night. The wind howled like a living thing. Snow stung her cheeks, blinding her. She didn't know where Marin the healer lived, only that Elodia had said, "the house with the blue door." She found it by sheer instinct, pounding on the door until her fists ached. The door swung open after what felt like an eternity, revealing a bleary-eyed man in a stained shirt, rubbing sleep from his face. "Please," Amara gasped. "My friend, he's burning up. He needs help." Marin hesitated. She could see it, and the calculation in his eyes, the measuring of risk, strangers, unknown pasts, maybe danger. "Please," she said again, her voice cracking. "I'll do anything." Something in her broke when she said it, some final shard of pride. Marin cursed under his breath and pulled on a coat. Together they stumbled back through the storm. Up in the loft, Marin worked quickly. He checked Ezra's pulse, peeled back his eyelids, muttered to himself. Amara hovered uselessly, her hands twisting in the hem of her borrowed dress. "How bad?" she croaked. Marin didn't look up. "Bad. Infections deep. Lungs are wet." He pulled a battered satchel from his coat and rummaged through it. "Needs willow bark, compresses, a tincture I don't have."